Welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. I'm Tim. This is Kimberly, and we're laughing because this is take number 3.
To just say hello.
To say hello.
So hello, number 4.
What is it about my opening? Once we're talking, I'm fine.
No, baby, I think you do great.
Yeah.
People may not know this, but you did radio for years where you had to open every single time.
Okay, let me just say, I don't know why that was such an issue, you
Yeah.
know, but anyway, when I would do radio, if I had to do like voiceovers for commercials, I'd always choke. It'd take me forever to get it done. Live radio, not so bad. So anyway.
So for me, anything scripted feels like I'm going to choke. But if I can just go off the top of my head, which obviously most of my opens are, and I go off on really weird tangents, but I don't feel nervous about it.
Well, we are Hope Rescue, as I said, in a very halting speech. Hello. Hope Rescue.
You said welcome this time. You didn't say
welcome.
hello. Yes.
Welcome to Hope Rescue Podcast. Anyway, sorry about that opening there, folks. You know what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about friends. And you know what friends do is that when you blow it,
they make fun of you.
They make fun of you. So my love language is slam humor.
Yes, but
you know there's 5 love languages. Number 6, though, is slam humor.
Well, I grew up with that, so I think that's why we were a good fit, for sure. Now, here's the thing. You like to give it out, but you don't necessarily love to get it.
I don't mind it as long as it's like not in areas that are sensitive.
That are real?
Like, yeah, it has to be
It's
fake.
no fun to tease someone if there's not something real.
Babe, you can't tease somebody about, like, if they're too skinny, or if they're too fat, if they're too tall, too short. You can't do that stuff.
No, that's true.
There's nothing you can do about it. Well,
Right.
there is, but not totally. And so you have to tease about things that don't matter.
Right. I do think when you're in your total slam humor zone is with your sons.
Yeah.
Because then it's like a fair game both ways.
Right.
And we're not condoning it. It is sort of a culture of our home.
Well, back to the topic, friendship. If you were to take a moment, you and our listeners, if you were to take a moment to think about if you were in a crisis, who would you go to?
Mm-hmm.
So you're in the middle of a life-shattering, let's make it dramatic, life-shattering crisis. Who's the first person, if you were to think about it, who's the first person you would go to? Second question.
Mm-hmm.
You have just had the greatest success on the job, or some life celebration, a birth of a child, or some great thing. Who do you go to? Who's the person that comes to mind that you go to celebrate with?
Right. And is that the same person?
That's a good point.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
But as you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, okay, those are the big grand moments, but really it's the everyday moments of small celebrations and even, disheartening dismay or disappointment, not necessarily like you've lost somebody in your life. Who in those moments do you go to? Because those really are usually your closest friends.
Yeah. So, excuse me, the person that comes to your mind on either one of those or both of those in a crisis or in a celebration really is going to determine how impactful they are in your life. I would just say the first person other than you, I talk to you all the time to the point to where you go, can we do something else right now? Let's not talk. If we go for a walk and anyway, okay, that's another story. But the first person that comes to my mind is my brother, Phil.
Yeah.
Immediately, I think, if something's going wrong, I want to talk to him about it. I went through kind of a medical thing, and I called him. We talked through it, and turned out to not be a big deal. But it's so nice to have somebody that you trust.
He feels like your best friend, but I just want you to know Uncle Phil is everybody's best friend.
If you don't like Uncle Phil, you got a problem. But the other thing is when you have something to celebrate, and a lot of times when you celebrate with your siblings, you have that rivalry.
Yeah.
But I don't have that with Phil. For whatever reason, he's the kind of guy that if something happens good in somebody's life, he celebrates.
Oh my
with
gosh,
them.
he's one of our best cheerleaders.
Those are the
he's
kind
listening
of,
right now, and we love you, Uncle Phil.
Yeah, he's our one listener.
Did we get that right? That note you sent us?
Yeah. The point being that when you go to people, You go to people because of their influence on you,
Right.
not because it's just someone that can hear and respond. It's
Opportunity.
more than that.
It's not just an opportunity.
Yeah.
It's intentional.
Right. Here's what I want to say about friendship. Friendship is influence. And what I would say about friendship without influence, it's nothing more than an acquaintance.
Yeah, that's
it's just,
good.
there's a lot of acquaintances you have in your life. There are people that you wouldn't go to in a crisis. You would not go to celebrate the great success, but it's a person that you would share casual things and so forth. But when you really need good influence, you go to a friend, and that's the only place where real positive, unfortunately negative as well, influence takes place. So,
Yeah. And now close friends, of course, there's an intimacy that's involved and almost a dependency in a healthy way, not a codependent way, but a healthy way. And those are two very different things because I think the older I get, and I don't know if you're the same way, I feel like I have a lot of, and I'm saying in air quotes, a lot of friends. But really, there's a handful of women that I will go to now at this point in my life that I will want to celebrate with, to cry with, and and just to have real, authentic conversation. And it's a give and take both ways. And those are precious. And I do believe, and I've shared this with our kids, you don't need a ton of friends. I think when you're younger, you feel driven toward it. Almost feels validating to have the larger circle of friends, and that's okay if you can manage that many. But rarely can you give what's required to have true intimate friendship with that many people. It's a give and take, and so the older I've gotten, I realize really you just need a few, and that's what I've shared with the kids.
And you have, so when I think of close friends versus casual friends, acquaintances, it has to do with intimacy, has to do with dependability, but it really, that word influence keeps coming up in my mind.
Yeah.
So I think of casual friends as limited influence and close friends as meaningful influence.
Yes.
And you have some friendships that are meaningful both ways that you will share. We were just talking about this the other day when we were walking. There was just there are people that you will go to that they've shared their heartaches,
Yes.
as well as you've shared your heartaches and successes and all that. And it's really important to have friends. I grew up in a baby boomer mentality, which was kind of the rugged individualism. It came from our, they say the greatest generation, or the World War II generation. That generation was obsessed about rugged individualism. They were loners, many of the men especially. But then the baby boomers caught that vision and the idea that you kind of do life alone or you're not really a man.
Yeah.
And I think I've struggled with that my whole life. I struggle with, I have friends, I have acquaintances, I have people that speak into my life, but there's always this kind of an idea that I can do this alone.
Right, which is kind of a setup for failure, and it's deemed maybe success in the past, where that rugged individualism. But truly, when you come from a spiritual perspective, we were created to not be alone, which is why Eve even showed up on the scene in creation. But we need each other and to do life together and to have that support system. It's one of the greatest gifts God has given us if we'll open our hearts to it. And it's just the idea of nobody is fully equipped to manage what life brings on their own.
Yeah. Here's something to keep in mind, that we only are vulnerable in front of people that we feel safe.
That's true.
The sentence lacked a little bit there, but you get the idea. The
Yeah.
safety is crucial for connection and intimacy and vulnerability. Friendship demands vulnerability. And if you're not vulnerable, you're not being a full-on friend both ways. There's that influence. But think about this. Who can betray you? Your enemy cannot betray you. Your enemy, their job description is to attack.
Oppose.
That's what the enemy is. And people that are casual friends or acquaintances, they don't have access to you and to your sense of safety and trust and so forth.
Yeah.
So they really can't betray you. The only person that can betray you is somebody that is an intimate friend. And
In your circle.
And they can really betray you. And we
Yeah.
see this happen a lot of times in marriage where things people get at odds with each other, and then they betray confidence. They betray, they start sharing weaknesses, not so that they can improve their relationship, but so that they can get people on their side. That's a problem. So if you've ever been betrayed, you've been betrayed by a friend.
Yeah.
Which leads me to a point about safety. A lot of men feel like they're going to be betrayed, and so the fear keeps them isolated from other men.
That's good.
They're afraid to be vulnerable at that level, that someone will not hold a confidence. That's one of the greatest things about having a counselor, a therapist, is that it's confidential.
Yeah.
You can go to that person and
Right.
say, whatever you're hurting and whatever you're struggling with, and they keep it
Yeah.
and they deal with it. They don't just, like everything's okay, you can be messed up. They actually try to help
Unpack
you.
it.
Yeah, right.
Well, and that actually, it's great you brought that up, because we feel like counselors are paid friends. Not such a bad thing
Yeah.
to have a paid friend that actually can help you. If you don't have a friend in your life that is more of a mentor or doesn't necessarily have the wisdom to help you, they're good listeners, but they don't have the wisdom to help you work through a particular situation, then spend the money and go to the therapist and get someone that you trust, and that paid friendship can pay off in a big way. Yeah.
Yeah, here's a concept that actually I developed in my book, Breathe. And Kimberly and I have talked about this quite a bit. When you're talking about anxiety, stress, negative emotions, depression, people are important to leverage friendships to help in your journey. So when I say leverage, I don't mean manipulate. I mean to really take advantage of the power of influence by people you trust.
Yeah.
And if you need a counselor, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Just like you were saying, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's something really right about that.
Yes.
And yet, you have to analyze who's in your world, who are you spending most of your time with. Let me talk about this from the perspective of a pastor. As a pastor, most of the time, for the last 47, 48 years, it's been people coming to me because they had a problem, not because they wanted to come encourage me.
Right.
Although I do get a lot of encouragement.
Yes.
Usually it's, after a service or a presentation of some kind, or, whatever. People write notes and say nice things. But when they come to me, they're coming to me for help. So I see the difficult side of people, the struggling side of people. Well, that drains us. That drains pastors.
Well, yeah. If you're not balancing that, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact of the matter, if you really care, you're going to be drained to a certain extent.
That's a good point.
And I don't mean that in a negative sense, like that's, oh, poor us.
No, but you're invested.
Yeah, you're invested in that person. So what I did was I started thinking about negative emotions, depression, anxiety, all kinds of negative emotions, and anger. And I realized there are people in my world that fuel the negative emotions, and there are people in my world that fuel the positive emotions. And it's not that they're bad people,
No.
or people that I'm deciding to love. For example, a child is not someone who is going to fuel you other than the fact that that love relationship is a powerful thing, but they're not there to, improve your life,
Right.
so to speak.
Well, they're not the one you would go to
Right.
get you back up on your feet.
so that's going to be, to a certain extent, draining.
Younger children, anyway.
Yeah. So I don't mean to say, as I develop this concept that I'm about to share, and I've shared it before on this podcast, but I want to share this idea of a two-team concept. And the two-team concept is your team and the opposing team. So think about football players. So you've got a football game, you've got your team, and you're a player on your team, and then there's the other team. And there are three groups of people. So on the opposing team, you have cheerleaders, and they are cheering for their team. They're not necessarily cheering against you,
Right.
although sometimes I've seen these crazy cheerleaders, mocking the other side. But, for the
Rare.
most
That's
part,
rare.
it's cheering on the team, cheering on the fans,
Crowd,
getting
yeah.
the fans, the crowd excited to encourage their team. So it's not that it's just terrible influence in your life, but it's kind of a nominal negative. And then there are team members on the other team, on the other football team, and they are suited up. They've got pads on, they've got helmets, they've worked out, they've trained, and their goal is to defeat you.
Right.
They are actively seeking to defeat you. So ask yourself this question. In your life, who are cheerleaders on the other team, or who are team members on the other team that are actively against you?
And hopefully
Now,
you don't have a lot of either of those.
yeah, but unfortunately, there
It's part
are
of
people
life.
in your world that
Work world,
you have
yeah.
to understand. Are these people
Yes.
against you?
Yeah.
We're not trying to develop into paranoia or people how you're going to love people. This is really about analyzing influence in your life. The third group, and the most insidious group, or I should say the most devastating group, is the coach on the other team. They are actually strategizing your demise, your defeat. So the team members are actively engaged in defeating you, but the coach is strategizing that, training people for that. So, hopefully you don't have people like that in your life, but you maybe do. We call them toxic. But then you have, on the positive, you have those who are your cheerleaders.
Your team members.
And they don't necessarily, improve your life greatly, but they do help.
They
Somebody
have a
that's
positive
cheering.
effect.
They
yeah.
do. But somebody that is a fellow team member, they suit up next to you. They're blocking for you. They're
that's good.
handing you the ball. They're taking the ball when you can't handle it. And they're running interference for you. So they're actively
Yeah.
seeking your win. And then think about the best people. We'll call them mentors, which we call in football metaphor, coach.
Right.
That coach is strategizing your win. So think about this. Who in your world influences you for their win or for your win? Who is seeking their win or your win? Now, they may not actively trying to defeat you, but they want to win. Selfish people want to win.
Right.
So analyze people in your life. Number one, not so that you will figure out whether you're going to love them or not. You need to love everyone or discriminate against them. But what you're going to do is determine how much time
Investment.
I'm going to invest in this relationship if they're not seeking my win. And from the standpoint of your life, think about your influence in other people. Are you in it for their win?
Yeah.
That's a
good.
real friend.
Yep.
So, yeah. If we have this passage, and we'll kind of close with this idea of Proverbs 12:26. You want to read that
Sure.
for us?
It says, "One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray." I love that. I love that term guide.
Yeah, 2 words, guide and lead. Yeah, what
Guide
is
and lead.
guide?
And guide is to explore and to seek out, and it implies that the influence on others is based on thoughtful planning. And
That's kind of like the coach.
yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like I definitely have a few of those in my life, which have been
you
such
definitely-
a blessing for so many years. And trusted wisdom, comes from them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have all the right answers, but you know that they have lived before you an example of knowing how to negotiate, some of the valleys of life, and they've learned some things, and they're giving that away to you freely, investing that in you.
Yeah, there are like your father was a pastor to pastors
Yes.
at the end of his life.
Yeah.
And the last 15 years of his life were all about giving back to other pastors.
Yes.
So he'd been a pastor, he'd been a leader, he'd been a denomination administrator, he'd been a missionary, he'd all of these things, a teacher. But then at the end of his life, it was like, I'm going to give back to pastors. I want to be an encourager
Just
of
love
pastors.
them.
And
Yeah.
he traveled all over the world doing that. So that's what we would call a guide, that one that is exploring and seeking out what is going to be the best for your win.
Right.
The other one the way of the wicked leads them astray. So you got two groups of people there in Proverbs 12:26. Your team, their team. Your team is a guide coaching you, looking for ways for you to win, exploring that. On the other side, the word lead literally means to lead or go astray through deception. So think about people that misrepresent or misinform in order to manipulate your world so that it's about them and not about you.
Yeah, that's good.
You have people in your life like that?
Intentional misinformation and deception that leads to ruin.
Yep.
So it's I'm actually thinking off the top of my head, oftentimes we have people in our broader circle that you think of them as potential cheerleaders, but actually if they're gossips, they're doing that. They're actually like tearing down who you are behind your back. And usually that will be exposed after a period of time of getting to know someone. And then you obviously know they're not on your team. But the deception is what made me think of that, is that oftentimes they use deception to create narratives or whatever against you. But and so it's an important, intentional job that you have to look into your life and to the people around you that you've chosen to surround yourself with, whether you think you have or not. If they're in your life, you've made choices, and to be able to discern who in my life is going to guide me and who is going to lead me astray.
Yeah. Next week, we're going to talk about, so we talked about the influence factor in relationships. Next time, we're going to talk about the direction. Every relationship has a direction, and we'll explain what we mean by that. It's really important for these episodes on friendship is to really important, the aspects of influence, direction, and we will, on the third episode, we'll deal with another aspect that maybe you haven't thought about. But friendships are important. God said this after creating man. He said, it's not good for man to be alone. We desperately need connection. We need friendships. And if you're going it alone, you need to find a trustworthy friend. And it may be in a place you already know, or a person you already know, or maybe somebody you've just met, and really analyze what influence they have in our life. Next time, we'll talk about direction in relationships. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on Hope Rescue Podcast.
Bye, guys.